Welcome, everyone. Today we are joined by Jack Pendergrass. How are you, Jack?
Doing well, Gabby. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I've been so looking forward to having Jack join us because he's just been an incredible researcher. I come across Jack probably only maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and I've just been blown away by the deep dive research he's been doing into an organization or a corporation, I should say, called Maximus. And I heard that name here and there, but until I saw some of Jack's work, I honestly had no idea of just the sheer size of this operation, how it was so networked in with governments across the world, and just how many of its tentacles are in so many of our systems. And while Jack is in the US and has started his research there based on the US systems, it all carries across. So here in Australia, I speak to advocates for children, and they were telling me months ago how Maximus had taken over our child protection contracts with the government. And I've had a look into, what else they have control of, and they have control of things like our Job Active, which is our unemployment service. If you're seeking funds from the government because you don't have a job, which is quite a big growing part of society at the moment with all the scamdemic going on. They're also working on a lot of contracts for our Medicare, so our healthcare service in Australia, and have taken on a huge contract just recently, which is our disability services. And we know that a lot of foster care children, a lot of children in state care and child protection come under that banner of disability services because of the abuse they've went through, for example. And they're really targeted, these children, because the states and the governments look at them as big dollar kids. They need extra services. And it's just it's been so interesting watching Jack's work and the amazing shares that he does, and we'll share where you can find Jack at the end of our interview today. But just to really see how much Maximus is across our world and really running these very important services for society as a private corporation, and we kind of really mistake it and think, oh, this is a government service, but it's a contractor. So we'll get into all of that as we go along, but I'd love, Jack, for you to sort of intro how you come across Maximus, because I know it was, with your own family even, so something very dear to your heart, and how that kind of, become your stepping stone to getting out and raising awareness to stop other families being victimized by this corporation.
Um, I guess, Gabby, it was almost by chance that I discovered what was happening as far as the child support side of things in the court case I had with my daughter's mother. We separated. It's a pretty nasty separation, but like so many parents, I ended up having to pay child support. And I want to preface this with I am an advocate for taking care of your offspring. I am not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that you don't. But what you don't want is to be in the child support program, because it has nothing to do with the child and it has nothing to do with support. Um, well, it does, but the support is for the government coffers. Um, it gets pretty involved pretty quickly.
Mm.
So we'll address that in a moment. Um, so this was in 2005, after my daughter's mother and I separated. Um, Ended up, of course, having to pay child support, and at the time, I was very uneducated about the system. Unlike so many other parents, non-custodial parents, and we need to make some clarifications here. You have custodial parents, and then you have non-custodial parents. And anybody who's been through the child support system is familiar with these terms, but for those who aren't, these are classifications of persons created by the Bar Association
Mm-hmm.
for the purposes of attacking your estate, which is through the Social Security system. subsequently, which is an agency of the IMF, and the IMF is an agency of the UN. So that being said, let's talk about Maximus. So Maximus, from all the research that I've done and gathered, Maximus was set up specifically to facilitate Title 4D funding, which is child support in the United States. I'm not sure how other governments are operating, but it would be through the UN compacts that all the other countries have signed, right?
Yeah.
So what they're doing is, and what they have done for a very long time, is literally making this a one world order for child support. They want it blanket and they want it uniform across any country that signed the Hague Treaty.
Yeah.
But it also dawned on me that in doing so, you have very evil people in very high places that are able to access these databases regarding children. So they're able to target not only the children but the parents. So they build up socioeconomic profiles through all this information that they're collecting through either child support, welfare, or welfare work programs. Any kind of medical information is attached to it, of course. They're capturing this stuff when the child's born, even before the child's born, through the mother when she's going to the doctor. Specifically, Maximus and their influence is incredible. Not only did they basically create the child support system, they've also influenced the legislation involving the child support system.
Wow. So that alone, Jack, is just out there, isn't it? Like when we look at it, this is a private contractor. So this is a corporation now influencing so-called government law, state laws, federal laws around our children. So a business is influencing laws.
Please, of course. But I think if anybody does study their quote unquote government, and this doesn't matter what country you're in, you're going to realize that it's a corporation.
Yeah.
And this corporation is contracting with other corporations.
Yeah.
And the money involved is astounding. Just in the United States, on the order of something of 60 billion a year.
Wow.
Passes through for child support for the 4D funding. It's called 4D funding because that's there again the 1975 Social Security Act, right? They started separating out titles. You have Title 4E for foster care, which Maximus has influenced.
Yeah.
You have Title 4D for child support. And originally in its inception, Title 4D was instituted to help states recoup money that they were spending out in their welfare programs. That's what we're told.
Yeah, that's the sell
right?
that we get.
yeah, it's a sales pitch,
Yeah.
But it couldn't be anything other than. And I want everybody to realize, like, I've spent many years researching this, and I can back up everything I say. Because I know there's going to be a lot of speculation when you hear this information. And
it's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is,
Yeah.
Because for a long time, Gabby, I was looking at this information and I was like, I know I'm not paranoid, but am I really seeing this information? And it was only through reaching out to a lot of people, that I got confirmation, hey, you're on the right track. This information is good and it's accurate. As far as like the discovery phase, I guess you would say, and how I discovered Maximus. It was something. I was going through some child support paperwork, some old paperwork, and I just noticed the change of a letterhead on a piece of mail. It went from the state of Tennessee Child Support Collection Services to Maximus Child Support Collection Services.
Wow.
It was something that subtle, and I was like,
Mm.
that's what really triggered everything. I was like,
And how many people wouldn't have stopped to, well, one, noticed it, but then perhaps stopped to look into that further? Do you know what I mean? So, I'm so glad that, not that this happened to you, but that you picked up on this and have been able to unravel it all.
yeah, I'm still unraveling, right? This
It's a
company's
big one.
yeah, it's so massive and so influential. Um, so it's not isolated to child support or welfare. I got into some really deep dives, and maybe we can touch on that later. But I'll give everybody a little perspective. So Maximus operates child support, welfare to work programs, um, Department of Education programs. They're involved in big tech, big pharma, the military industrial complex, which is their origins was the military industrial complex.
Yeah.
So right now, at last count, just in the United States, they were capturing over, I think, something like 4,000 contracts a year per fiscal year. Some of these contracts are worth not hundreds of millions, but billions.
Wow.
I've found single contracts worth anywhere from 13 to 20 billion for a single contract. Now, as you touched on the scamdemic, and that's exactly what it is, because we know,
Yeah.
we know where we know where the origin is DARPA.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's DARPA who was farming out the stuff to various agencies, the NIH being one of them here. So the founder of Maximus is former DARPA. So you have a man who was, you have a man, his name's David Vincent Mastron. And I want to tell everybody too, I've got a solid foundation on the initial iteration of Maximus. Now it's, the corporate structure's changed, people have changed, but pretty much what they're doing has it. Their bread and butter is the disadvantaged, poor people. That's who they attack.
Yeah, it really is focused on those vulnerable people, isn't it, Jack? Like when we look at disabilities, single parents, people needing healthcare, people needing payments because they're unemployed. Like they've really went in for people that are vulnerable and need financial assistance, and so they can control these people as such as well. So it's quite scary.
Yeah, it really is terrifying to think, a corporation has this kind of control over your normal person's life, and they do. And aside from we adults, but you have children, you have innocent, disadvantaged children,
and most vulnerable,
and they do not care. And when you start researching just the child support aspect of this, it's I can't say it any other way. You have these databases that Maximus created that are dedicated, that basically serve as a shopping list for pedophiles. What I mean by that is, Maximus was the company that initially created the foster care, teen pregnancy, and runaway databases. They contracted with IBM, and if you know anything about the history of IBM, you know IBM was involved in the Holocaust, creating the system for Hitler, which
Wow.
is it's the precursor to the Social Security system, Social Security number system. Okay, that's IBM's contribution to society,
Oh,
however you want to say it.
horrific.
Yeah, so we know these biosurveillance systems have been in place since the 30s and 40s, right? Um, and I want to drop some names too that people I've been learning from too. Twyla Brace, who is from Minnesota, she's an RN. Um, some of her research I've picked up on and read. Tremendous woman, very intelligent, very acute and sharp in her observations. Um, Another lady named Beverly Tran, and a gentleman named Charles E. Corey. Um, so I bet I learn from any source I can, but I want everybody to also understand that I'm not a plagiarist. I'm not going to take somebody's work without giving them credit. But
Well, we can
I
all
I
learn from
don't.
each other. I think it's so great that we can collaborate all over the world, even like this conversation today. I mean, I'm in Australia, you're in the States, and we're talking about, issues that affect all of us. And I think that that's our strength, is building these communities of support and being able to collaborate and share on projects as well. So well done.
Yeah, Gabby, and thank you for having me. I'm flattered. Like um, I was in a vacuum for a long time because I was holding this information, not knowing what to do with it or who to share it with, and I started out on Facebook, and um, trying to put some information out to see what kind of see if I could get any feedback, and I started receiving feedback. So I jumped to Twitter, and then because of some of the information evidently I was putting out, Twitter banned me completely.
I've had that
So
happen to me as well.
yeah, they shut me down so completely I couldn't even log in. Like I was like, oh wow, you guys got my IP address, thanks. So
So much
yeah,
for
I've
speech, right?
yeah, so much for free speech, especially in the States, right?
Oh, we're pretty bad here too, Jack. We're like a state.
Yeah, I've
Like,
come to realize, Gabby, like and it's the same people, these same groups that are doing the same things in all these other countries. I know I did some really deep diving on it, and we ended up back at we ended up back in Italy, going back to the Vatican and the Jesuits.
yeah.
So that's how far back I've taken this research. I guess I've always been a student, and I guess I always will be a researcher. So it's taken a long time to make these connections, but I'm glad I have. Kind of starting to build a good solid foundation of what we're looking at. And
You're doing a brilliant.
Australia seems Australia is critical because you're in the Pacific Rim basically. So coming up from Australia, we have Philippines, Malaysia, and then we get into uh, Southeast Asia.
Mm. Well, we've sort of noticed,
Subsequently,
we sort of see that we often become, because we're like an island and we're not as big as the States, for example, in terms of population, we often seem to be like their little petri dish, their little test run of what they're going to roll out around the world, because we're so isolated, we can't escape when they shut down flights, for example, as well. And I know that with your research, you actually found Maximus was so involved in that whole scandemic rollout, like they were working with DARPA, sort of like mediating between DARPA and, you know, the rollout of various programs to control people and control the monies and, you know, control the information going out. And, you know, I'd love you to speak a little bit on that as well, because, you know, we can look back at history and learn and see, you know, every time they bring out this big fear event, this, you know, social engineering, it's like, oh, we're doing this for your safety. You know, you're unsafe. We need to help you. We need to come and save you. And all that really happens is, you know, we lose more of our rights. You know, in Australia, we've had false flags like this where we've lost our guns, for example, you know, and the general public just is so tuned into the propaganda on the TV, the radio, what the politicians are saying, and they just follow along, you know. But if you're actually, you know, using common sense and observing and asking questions, you can clearly see they're herding us into, you know, their idea of one world government, you know, losing the whole idea of nations, breaking down families, and really taking away more control. And Maximus has been a big part of this, hasn't it, Jack?
Yeah, it really has, Gabby, and you bring up some great points. Where I'm at in Tennessee, um, and I know there are some other states where their child support issues are pretty severe, but a lot of people don't realize this, and I discovered this a few years ago. I'm near Chattanooga, which is in the southeast corner of Tennessee, so I'm right above the Tennessee-Georgia border. And I would encourage everybody to, do a little bit of do some geography studies. So where I'm at it's much like Australia. We're a petri dish for World Economic Forum and UN agendas, right? And that includes family court and child support program. We're a beta testing site.
Wow, we've got a lot in common.
So yeah, it's frightening, because I've been reading about Canberra and a few other places in Australia. I'm like, wow, there's so many parallels between you all and where we're at here in the States. But it's exactly like you said. Maximus has been such a critical part of this, and for so long they've escaped the public eye intentionally because they don't want anyone knowing what they do. Not that they care, because obviously they've been conducting business like this for the past 50 years. But they don't want anyone to understand the stranglehold they have on the healthcare systems. And just my personal opinion of it, what we're seeing being rolled out is part of the B system. These are individual components of the B system that we read about in scripture.
Yes.
Maximus is in my estimation, there might be other companies like Maximus, but I have yet to see anybody or any corporation that has this kind of influence and sway.
Wow.
And I mean, and I'm even talking about Serco and IBM, Bay Systems, Raytheon, and a few of the other, some of the other major military industrial complex companies. As far as the scandemic, Maximus, right? So we need to back up just a moment and talk about biosurveillance, right? What that is. We're talking, bio information, whether it be something as simple as your eye color or your hair color or your blood type. Maximus has all of your information, and this is through these healthcare programs. I shudder to think how large their databases are, right? Because I know, yeah. So if you think about that on a global scale, it becomes increasingly frightening, because I know for a fact that the Maximus databases here in the States clips that of even the NSA.
Wow.
Yeah, they're massive. It's massive, and the
And that's
amount of
so
information.
NSA is your, just because we're going to have a few different terms, NSA is your national security. Is that right? Yeah. So we've got
National,
a corporation bigger than national security in terms of a database. Like, what's going on there?
yeah. Um, I mean, to surmise it simply, it's part of the B system, whereas I think a lot of people have the opinion that the monetary systems are going to kind of be what enslaves humanity. I'm of the opinion that it's going to be healthcare,
Mm,
because it is such a massive umbrella. You can put everything under healthcare,
that's true.
from finances to health, your children, to even the basic necessities: food, water, clothing, shelter,
Yeah.
all fall under that umbrella. Um, there again, that's just my opinion. So healthy debates are always good, right?
Well,
So
I think that's a very good inference, because if we have such a huge corporation like Maximus really targeting things like, payments from the government for being unemployed, health, disability, children, we've got them handling students coming in to study in Australia. All of those groups need healthcare. And they, like you said, they can put everything under it. So, it would make a lot of sense that Maximus is going to become the structure for them to continue, increasing control going forward as well.
yeah, yeah, exactly, Gabby. And so when we talk about like corporate structures and privatization, Maximus laid the blueprint for that here in the United States. They
What
picked
sort
up.
of time frame was Maximus set up in, Jack? Just so we can kind of get a timeline.
So we'll say formally.
Yeah, visibly. They've
Yeah,
probably been
visibly.
deeming this for hundreds of years.
Yeah, yeah. We'll say for the modern iteration, for what they tell us, and I'll clarify that in a moment. They were founded in 1975.
Yeah. So nearly
Okay,
50
now,
years. Nearly
yeah.
50
So
years ago. Wow.
yeah. So previous to that, though, here's the thing. Previous to that, the founder, David Vincent Masterson, and I would encourage everybody to start looking at Maximus in your own country,
Yeah.
looking at their structure in who's who. Um, so before he formally founded Maximus, he was in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. He was in the agency that predates the
Mhm.
Department of Health and Human Services.
Wow.
It was, I think, in 75 or 76 when it went from that agency to Department of Health and Human Services. So he had access to all this information even before that.
Wow.
You know, this guy, if you had a poster child for deep state spook,
He's
that's
ex-archer
about
as well, isn't he? So,
yeah. This guy, and here's why the biosurveillance programs are so pertinent to what we're talking about. He was part of DARPA while he was in Vietnam.
wow.
He was part of multiple programs, of course, and some of them are still classified. But there's one in particular that was declassified called Operation Igloo White. Um, this is when we really saw technology being utilized to record biometrics.
Wow.
So they were dropping from various aircraft, whether it be I'm sorry, my dogs are barking.
That's all right. He's saying hi.
Yeah,
He wants his 10 seconds.
yeah, they're pitties. I have pit bulls, so they're lively.
They sure are.
Um, so Igloo White was when we saw um, just a real uptick in technology being used on the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
It's my thoughts that, while they say we lost the war in Vietnam, I would agree and then also disagree. I think they achieved what they wanted to in implementing the technology they were exploring.
Yeah.
So they were dropping different types of surveillance systems, but these surveillance systems were equated to um, small devices, probably 18 to 24 inches long, maybe a little larger.
Wow.
Um, so these devices as a and they blended in with the foliage in Vietnam. So they were hidden on the battlefield, right? So these devices were being deployed, recording what information they could, and they could detect different types of urine. I think they could differentiate between male and female urine types.
Wow.
Um, I'm not sure of the exact capabilities, so nobody quote me on that. I'm still studying this stuff. But,
Surprising. Like you wouldn't think that that kind of technology was available way back then, because we're talking like what was the Vietnam War was like the late 40s into 50s, wasn't it? So we're talking about a long time ago, to have this kind of technology.
yeah, you go from World War II and Korean War, and then we come up a few years into Vietnam, right, into the 60s, and I don't know how many have studied DARPA, and I'm studying them very intently right now.
Yeah.
Conservatively, the tech that we see as consumers, as the public, a lot of it, probably most of it, is derived from DARPA and NASA,
Absolutely.
right? So the conservative estimates are anywhere from 15 to 20 years in advance for the tech they have now. So what we're seeing is 15 to 20 years old conservatively.
Yeah, at least, right?
Right. And I've heard estimates as much as 50 to 100 years.
Same.
So they're that far advanced.
Yeah.
So here we are in the 60s, and it occurred to me these devices were the forerunners of some of the nanotech that we see now doing the same thing, but just on a much smaller scale.
Well, we could compare those drops to things like smart dust and what's coming down in chemtrails and that kind of thing today. So we've went from all this testing in Vietnam, because that's what the wars are all about, testing DARPA's latest technology that they can sell to governments and terrorists all over the world. And it just keeps going, keeps going.
Yeah, it really does, Gabby, and it's also led me to back to the above ground nuclear testing, um, conducted, just by everybody in the 40s and 50s and even on up into the 60s. Um, the founder of Maximus, his father, was involved in the Eisenhower administration's food irradiation program.
Wow.
So I'm starting to see a convergence of like the information I've been collecting. I'm seeing
Yeah.
a,
And
a
was
circle.
that
So
program, Jack, about the radiation, that was something about children too, wasn't it? They were testing the effects of
yeah,
radiation on children in some way.
yeah, they were. I don't know about some of the other countries. I'm still, like I said, I'm researching this stuff daily, just uh, so I can, my perspective is on the United States, but what the implications are, whatever they're doing here is usually
It's the world.
occurring in other. Yeah, yeah. So we're looking at MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We're looking at, there was one in particular that was horrible. It's called the Fernald School, where they were giving children radioactive isotopes in oatmeal to as experimentation, just to see what the effects would be.
Wow.
Um,
How horrific.
yeah, it's
And again,
these people.
vulnerable children in state care are targeted
Yeah,
again for experimentation, and that's still continuing today. So
it really is, Gabby, and I'm sure I found some of the United States codes that allows for that. It's actually legal to do the testing on children because they're wards of the
so
state.
wrong. So
Yeah,
wrong.
so it's I believe in God and Christ. I want to make that very clear to everyone. Thusly, I also believe that there is the devil, Lucifer himself.
Sure is.
Um, I believe scripture, and this is not through any blind belief. I've study everything. I was raised in the church. I got away from it for a while, and all of this has led me back to God, Christ, and I am so thankful for that.
Yeah.
That being said, I fully believe that there are people who are demon possessed, and they're the ones operating these systems.
Absolutely. They're puppets. They're the puppets of the enemy, really, aren't they?
They really are, and I'm like, to what end? I mean,
Yeah.
to have your soul destroyed in the end, is that what you're seeking? For temporary money and power, and for whatever sick disposition you have, Yeah, no, I'm good on that.
Yeah. No thanks. No, not in this lifetime or any other one. Thank you. See ya.
No, yeah, yeah. I'm like it's so foolish, and I kind of make fun of it. I'm like, I was talking to in the chat a few nights ago, and I'm like, I'm more evil. No, you're more evil, or people going back and forth like, I'm better than you are. I'm like, it's so. Anyway, um,
It's
these are
great that you highlighted that, Jack, though, because, I think when we look at these, corporations and it gets technical and we're looking into like DARPA and, wartime technology, etc., it's important to remember that this is a spiritual war or a spiritual challenge that we're living through at this time. So as much as there is, these very physical systems and, technology and frequency weapons that we're up against, I think we can go higher than that and remember that it's a spiritual war, and that also gives us the answers of, like you said, finding God, finding our strength, finding Jesus in our hearts, and finding that strength to keep going, because what they want to do is wear us down. What they want to do is, just make us think, oh, I just can't do it anymore. Please come and save me. And yeah, that ain't going to happen. So
right, and I've had some times where I'm like, well, I don't know if I should keep pursuing this.
yeah.
But then I realized, those voices of doubt, or anything like that's not coming from God. That's
That's our enemy.
coming from the opposite. Yeah, it's the enemy attacking us. And I'm like, if I give up, you win, and I'm not going to allow that.
Damn straight.
And it's not been through my strength alone. I can't do this alone. I have to have that higher power. I have to have God, Christ with me. Otherwise, I fail. I fail completely relying on me, because you know me as a person, I've definitely got my flaws. So
Part of being
so
human, isn't it?
yeah, it really is, Gabby. And But I would encourage anybody, like if you start researching this stuff, you really should be in touch with your faith, because it will lead you to some things that you never knew existed, never wanted to know existed. Um, get your heart and your mind right if you pursue these avenues. Um, and I really think that all of everything that we're seeing has to be viewed through, a, through the teachings of Christ, God. It has to be viewed through that lens. It's only then will it make any sense. Um,
So true.
I mean, because you think about it and you're like, what kind of normal person would think like this? Well, they're not.
They're soulless, to
Yeah,
even, when we look at it, to be able to profit off of vulnerable children, to seek to break up families, to profit off of vulnerable children, that's not human. Like that is
it
something
will.
else. That's completely
Yeah,
and like you said, that's where we start getting into people being controlled by other energies, etc.
yeah. And you know yourself, Gabby, as a survivor, you know how bad things can get.
Yeah.
You know, and on a little more superficial level, you know, for anybody who's been through, say, the welfare system, been through the family courts and child support systems, you see
So true.
firsthand the evil these people are capable
Yeah.
of.
When I speak to parents that are going through this, it's an unnatural trauma of having their children removed for often absolutely no reason, or struggling against the system to get payments for a child that needs help, all of it. The pain in these people, like when they have their most loved, their own children taken away from them in any way, it's just unbearable. It's absolutely soul destroying, soul breaking, and I look at those parents and I think they are the strongest people in the world, as much as the children are so strong, for continuing on. And it's just awful that so much of society is willing to turn away from that pain, because if we were all to become aware and speak out and start doing things in our communities about this, we would change it so very quickly. But I think we've been so conditioned that if someone's in pain, if someone's hurting, sure, you might be like, oh, you're okay, but then that's their problem. And that can't be the case, because these parents aren't equipped, these children aren't equipped to fight against a system like Maximus. Like what you've been saying, Jack, it's huge, it's got its tentacles in everything, and it's so important for us to stand together and firstly raise awareness, because we need to know who the enemy is, and then start creating strong communities, start keeping our families together, because this war is very much about breaking up the family unit. There might be a whole lot of other stuff going on, but that's what they want to do the most, is break our families so they can access our children. And our parents are going to be broken because they've lost the thing they love most. So we can't let that happen.
No, we can't, and it's happened for far too long. You know, there again, when Maximus was founded, you know, previous to that, we had Roe versus Wade in the states that passed initially. That in itself was detrimental to society. You know, not just here in the United States, but globally. You know, so we saw an industry created off aborted babies.
It really is.
That's as base as I can say that. In '74, we had the creation of the DTC, which is the Depository Trust Corporation. Um, the Depository Trust Corporation, this is another rabbit hole, but it's all related. Um, I guess for your friends in Australia, some of you are familiar with Santos Bonacci, some of his work. But I started learning about the DTC and the banking side of all of this through studying commercial law,
Wow.
maritime law, maritime admiralty jurisdiction, right? Um, so there again, we have a series of events that leads up to Maximus being created, and all with intent and purpose.
Mm.
And that intent was to destroy the family unit. First, they went after the fathers with child support.
Yeah,
Then they went after the women with feminism.
so true.
So then we arrive where we're at now. Well, I mean, they've always been after the children. Let's just say that they've always been after the children. But there has been it just there again. This is aside from the facts. I'm trying to throw at everybody. My opinions are pretty solidly founded. I like to think that.
Yeah,
But they've always been after the children. But I think within the past 15, 20 years, maybe a little bit longer, we've really seen things escalate
definitely.
with these agencies and these corporations going after children.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like there's been a massive expansion in the last 2 decades from what I can see in Australia. So they had the systems there, but they've just exploded. Like everything's almost doubled year upon year upon year. So more children are being taken. They've got quotas to meet. We've got child support, well, wouldn't even call them that, but people working in child protection that are getting paid bonuses on how many children they place in alternatives to their family. Like, what is that driving?
right. And um, it's not isolated to the U.S. It's worldwide child trafficking. Once the family unit is broken up, then we see the children being placed into foster care. So then from foster care, we know that is a straight pipeline to child trafficking, and God forbid, you know, we know some of the more extreme things that happen.
Exactly.
Um,
And an important thing to note as well is, children are about 5 times more likely to be abused in care outside of their family. And that's regardless of the situation at home. Like there's a lot of families struggling, there's mental illness, sure, there's a lot of things, there's abuse at home, yes, but 5 times more likely. And that's out of what's reported. Like I can imagine a lot of children in out of home care wouldn't be in the position to report abuse. It's just not safe enough for them. So tragic.
exactly, 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 Gabby. These the numbers, I see posted by various agencies, by people in these industries. This is just what they report.
Yeah.
Um, that's what we know on a superficial level. Um,
Yeah.
but we know that what we're told is something along the lines of anywhere from about 80 to 90% of children that are trafficked usually come through the foster care system.
So
So just with that single number, that single estimate,
yeah,
um, we see where one of the primary sources for child trafficking lies, and it's within the foster care system.
yeah.
Um,
And now we know Maximus is looking after that with their databases, with their data mining. And who's to say who is this corporation selling that data to? What ethical controls are over that at the moment? Who has access to it? It's really scary.
it's you go to the Maximus website, right? And it's nothing but PR.
Yeah, I've had a
It's
look. It looks so rosy. I might actually put in a little ad from Maximus. And like, if you didn't know better, it's like, we've been running for 50 years and we're here to help your children and bring, keep families happy. And it's like, no, like it's a complete opposite to what you can speak to families about and their experience. But it does, like for someone that has no idea, it looks so rosy. And I noticed they actually use a lot of purple here in Australia for their advertising, which is quite interesting because we were breaking down the color programming around purple recently, and it's all about portraying false light. So it's a really good way to confuse people's minds when you have a lot of purple in your logo, because they're like, oh, this seems really lovely. It kind of gets, it's heartfelt, it's spiritual, and it's a really easy way for these predator groups or predator corporations to come in and be like false light to us. And I was like, look, that pretty much sums up Maximus to a T, as false light.
Right.
I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, they I'm an artist also, so it's like, we know that there's a psychology behind,
Yeah.
and the emotions that different colors evoke. So there's that aspect, but then we also know these groups, these grooming associations, these quote unquote secret societies, Freemasons, Masons, and beyond that, we all know that they use signs and symbols and different color combinations to alert or allude to what they do and who they are at their very core. So Maximus is, all right, and this threw me off for a moment. I got to researching Italy. And one of the black nobility families in Italy that still sits up top is the Maximus Orsini clan.
Wow.
So it's some speculation on my end, I'll admit that, but I would think the name Maximus and the gentleman and his father are both Italian, and I think that name of the company might be a nod to the origins.
People in power. Wow, that's incredible. Doesn't it? It just seems like so much leads back. If not, once you go back with everything, it just leads us back into Rome, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does, and it's leading me. It's led me into the Phoenicians. When we like I said, I think all of this stuff has to be looked at from a biblical and scriptural perspective.
Definitely.
Then you will start being able to focus, and so we know that the Venetian black nobility were the biblical Canaanites, which were also called the Phoenicians.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the maritime admiralty jurisdiction comes about.
Mm-hmm.
So we see origins coming from Freemasonry, Babylon, the Talmud, and Gnosticism. There's none of these systems that, none of this is coincidence.
Yeah.
And it's all led us up to here, So
wow, it's just incredible, isn't it? It's like these cults have had, and these really old families that go way back have had these plans for so long. And, through maritime law, through owning our courts, through owning our governments, they've been able to now, which are corporations even, have just now created their cult plans, but through massive corporations. And, I can't think Maximus is just, such a huge example of, what they can make physically from all of their, occult knowledge and control of different groups through all their technology, their black magic technology, frequency weapons, etc. It's just startling. And I think one of the things that, really stood out to me when I was going through some of your research, Jack, with Maximus and understanding it is like, I'm always asking why, why would they do it as a corporation? To control and roll it out that way. And I think for a lot of people that are just realizing and hearing this and understanding the government's not controlling all these systems, it's a private corporation. It really reflected to me, it was such a similar model to what they've done in the military with their contractors. So the military for a long time, was actually its own thing. And then decades and decades ago, they started just contracting out all these jobs to different contractors, your Raytheons, your Boeings, etc. And
right.
the benefit there for the military was, when things go wrong, when there's legal cases, when, they get caught child trafficking and human trafficking, which these companies have, they just pay a big fine. And it doesn't really affect the government or the military or people's perception of, services for society. It's more like, oh, that company was a bit naughty, pays this fine, but then they keep getting, these huge contracts. And, I see that, military model reflected so much in what you've uncovered with Maximus. And really, they've got no obligation to the people. Not that the government's really doing their job either, but we would go to the government and complain, and they'd just be like, oh, this is just a corporation, they're just operating. So, they're about profit, really. So it's quite scary how they've used that whole maritime law and corporation law to really just, push back on the people.
Yeah, and I'm like yourself, Gabby. I was looking at them like they're operating through. Okay, we have Maximus, we have Maximus Federal, and then all the subsidiaries. I'm like, at last count, Maximus. This is, I think, just in the United States. Maximus had over 387 subsidiaries.
Wow.
Um,
So it's growing. It's growing fast.
it's exponential nearly. I think the last country they started, they opened the market in was, want to say it was South Korea. But they
Okay.
went from Singapore to South Korea, and then I think somewhere. I'm still trying to establish some timelines of like when they began in these various countries. I think no, I'm sorry. The newest country they started in was United Arab Emirates. So they're running programs in UAE, Saudi Arabia, Italy. And what's important about Italy and the UK, those are being funded by the European Union.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know about their foothold in Australia just yet, but I know that in the United Kingdom, they're running the Ministry of Justice contracts. So we're seeing,
Wow.
so
So
they're
control of the
so
courts.
the control of the courts, and
But
and
how
more
can,
important,
even if they get taken to court, then Jack, no problem. Wow.
because they contract with the bar so heavily,
Yeah.
all the legislation, all the laws are in favor for them to remove any kind of liability, right? So what we're seeing and they've done the same thing in the United States. They've done the same thing in the UK. They're also in Sweden and just probably 10 or 12 other countries they operate. They remove liability wherever is possible.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, it's so these corporations aren't held liable. They pay a fine, and it's just business as usual.
Exactly.
And the collateral collateral damage is the lives of men, women, and children just trying to live.
That's it. And
And
most
that's
vulnerable.
yeah,
So
it's like I said, Gabby. I've been looking at a lot of companies. I've yet to find any one particular company that is that does what Maximus does. That's as entrenched as they are. I think globally they have between 36 and 38,000 employees. That's small compared to some of these other companies, but these other companies do not
have this.
perform these functions.
Yeah. They're so
So
networked in with our governments, aren't they? Like in so many areas. It's just mind blowing.
yeah, they
How would they compare to, I mean, everyone hears about BlackRock and Blackstone, etc. There's been a lot of people uncovering that kind of information recently. But from speaking to you, it sounds like this is even more, perverse in terms of the level of control it has over people. What would you say?
All right, I want to make this very clear for everyone, and it's been circulating for some time now that BlackRock is the company that owns the world.
Yeah.
No, no. The Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, the DTCC, which is the holding company for the DTC, which I mentioned earlier. The DTCC operates in quadrillions, not trillions or billions, quadrillions. The DTCC effectively owns every stock certificate in the United States. If there's a stock security transaction, it goes through the DTCC. Even these corporations don't even own their own stocks. It's the DTCC.
Wow.
They control the last number I had, just in terms of assets, the DTCC controls is something on the order of 60 to 80 trillion. So that BlackRock and Vanguard or any other company besides that are paltry compared to the DTCC. Here's the thing: the DTCC, Seed and Company, CEDE and Company. These are owned by the Jesuits.
Always comes back to them, doesn't it?
Yeah. I was, like I said, I was studying some commercial law and things like that, and I was like, and the first person I heard speak about it was a gentleman named Gene Keating, and in terms of like self-governance and learning these things for yourself. Gene Keating is just solid. He's an older gentleman, pretty crass, but he knows his information. He was the first person I heard speak about it, and I was like, well, okay, he touched on it briefly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I've got to do more research. If he's talking about this. So yeah, in one of his seminars and in some of his documents, he breaks down the power structure and the Federal Reserve System. So these are all systems. Yeah, it goes right back to Rome. It goes back to the Vatican. It goes back to the Jesuits, and to the nation. The Venetian black nobility and black nobility in Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, the UK. But all of this originated in Italy. As far as like our modern iteration of what we know as banking, right? So that's what it all comes down to. They're looking at the power and influence and access to children and the money. The money's kind of inconsequential to these people, right? They're just evil. They want the power and influence. So yeah, it gets deep really quickly when we start discussing.
It's so incredible just thinking it all goes back to Rome and seeing, these huge corporations linking back as well. And it makes so much sense, that we've got the Jesuits sitting above this, because they're controlling most of the puppets on our world stage at the moment as well. So it's just such an orchestrated system. I would love to ask Jack, from someone that, you've done so much deep diving into, Maximus and how these things all play out together. Like, I feel your response in terms of solutions would be brilliant, because you have done so much research. You've seen how the systems kind of connect and how they work. What do you look at as, the best solution that we, the people, can come together and do individually in groups around the world to kind of, challenge, and I think that's the thing, is we sort of feel a bit sometimes like it's a David and Goliath thing. It's like just me against this like huge monstrosity, this huge octopus that has its tentacles and everything. And I think for a lot of people that's too much. They're just like, it's too much, I just can't do anything. And that's what they want. So, what would you say after, you've spent over a decade like really looking into this and discovering what's going on? What do you see as their tender spots that we can work on and work through to create change?
Um, don't look at them as court cases, because they're not. The most, I guess, first and foremost, we have to be aware of what they're doing. We have to understand all this garbage that they throw out as at us as what's a law, what's a code, what's a rule, law, regulation, policy, blah blah blah. Don't get bogged down with that stuff, but be aware of what they're telling you.
It's really about us knowing our rights, isn't it? And I feel like that's been a big journey for all of us over the last 3 or 4 years and beyond, because we've had so much thrown at us. Like, I know myself, I've had to look up, do they even have the right to do that? And quite often when you look at it, it's like, oh no, it's just a suggestion. It's not legal. I mean, they could fine you, etc. But, are you going to pay the fine anyway? So I think it's like we need to really know our rights, where we can exert our power and how we can say no. Because it's so easy, because we've been brainwashed for generations to just think I've got to obey that person in that uniform, when they probably don't even know the law that they're enforcing anyway. They're just following orders. So I think that's a really important part.
We begin by doing what we're doing
now. Definitely.
And if you're not sure about what's happening in your area, start networking where you can, and where people will listen to you, and if you can find a common ground, right? Start locally. If you see what you think is an issue, or that's been addressed before and nobody's done anything about it, say something. If you don't start networking and you start using your voice and defending your God-given unalienable rights that these corporations have systematically taken from us, I don't know what else to tell you.
No, that's brilliant. I think it's so simple, isn't it? It's us remembering our power and actually just calling out when we see something's wrong, because for so long we've been silent, like we've fallen asleep at the wheel, and we've kind of just went along with whatever they roll out, like, and now it's reached the point where it's like, no, back off, guys, like, no way. So I think that's brilliant advice, Jack, just to know your rights and say no.
Yeah, God gives us. We are not meant to be timid. We're not called to fit in or be subjugated to these tyrants. That is not what we're called to do. But nothing of that nature. That is not what God gives us. He does not give us the spirit of fear or confusion. That's coming from the enemy.
Sure is.
I would say, start with your rights. Read your Bible. Read Scripture. God will provide you more guidance than any one man or woman or any person on this earth. God will give you more guidance. That being said, reach out to people who are talking about these things. You hear or see somebody, reach out to them. Hey, can you provide me with more information on this subject, because I can't seem to find anything? I think you'll find that there are a lot of people out there willing to provide that information and put you on the right path. We have to identify the enemy, what they're doing, So for anybody who's studying law or court cases, a Black's Law Dictionary or a Bouvier's is essential, because what the attorneys are doing, and your quote unquote judges are attorneys, they're just wearing a black robe. Those are spells that they're casting.
Sure.
It's literal spells. It's deceptive language used to confuse your normal person. Normal people don't speak in code.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what these people do. And so I would say start networking with people of like-mindedness. Remember who you are. Stand up for your rights. Learn what these people are doing. And when you're addressing a court case, what they won't tell you, and I've been learning this over the past 3 or 4 years, best way to approach a court case is to look at it from the banking perspective.
Interesting.
They're all taxable events. Every single thing they do, any kind of document you sign, they can monetize and turn it into a security.
Wow.
And trade it on the stock exchange.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So when you're talking about a court case, you're talking about bonds, right? So these bonds are, at least in the States, anything from a traffic ticket to a simple citation to large settlements. Ultimately, they end up in the district courts, and the district courts feed that back in, either to the court registry investment system, or a combination of that, and they're trading on the stock exchange. They've monetized everything that you've done. And
this is meant to be justice, but it's just become a greedy power pyramid of structure, hasn't it? It's just so corrupt.
And forget what you know about the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are the bankers for these families that are above them, that tell the Rothschilds what to do.
What do they call them? The Rothschild means red shield. So they're just shielding these families. They're not top at all. They're just PR, taking a bit of heat.
Yeah, the Rothschilds, their original last name, I think, was Bauer, which is farmer.
There you go.
So, but, even, not to go off on a tangent, but, the Rothschilds claim that, they can trace their lineage back to Nimrod. So, anyway, so these systems, I guess what I mean to say is, these systems all stem from, these ancient bloodlines. They're nothing but evil and deceptive.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that, then you don't know how to mitigate or even attack it, right?
Exactly. We have to know the enemy. We have to really know who we're up against and what we're up against, don't we? That's such a big part of us finding our strength. Yeah.
It really is, Gabby, because like I said, beginning this research about Maximus, I was like, oh, it's just child support.
Yeah.
That is a critical part of their corporate structure and kind of their bread and butter, but it's so much more than that. But if you don't know, then how do you deal with something? It's like being angry. You're angry, okay, but do you know why you're angry, or you're upset, or you're happy? It's incredibly powerful, I think, to be able to identify whether the emotions are good or bad, or whatever it is. The why. How, what, when, where, why.
Definitely.
And that's kind of where these corporations and the enemy exist, is keeping people confused and away from the truth about what they're seeing or what they're going through.
say the truth will set you free, right? So it's got to
Right.
be about that. Yeah. Well, yeah, and before we finish up as well, Jack, I'd love for you to share where people can find you, because I'm sure a lot of people will listen to this and be like, their minds will be blown about Maximus, and they'll want to find some more information and potentially reach out to you about things that they know as well. So I know you've got a wonderful Telegram group where you're always sharing, really relevant research.
Yeah, I'm on Telegram. It's Maximus Disclosure. Um, they can find me through your channel, Gabby.
Absolutely.
And I love your content. You're amazing. So again, I'm flattered that you would have me. So
Oh, it's an honor to have you. I think your research is phenomenal. So I've been so looking forward to sharing your work. We've finally done it.
yeah, I
But
couldn't
it's
be
been
I couldn't be
I'm
more
sure.
excited. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
So Telegram would be the best way for people to reach out.
yeah.
So
That's probably where that's going to be. I'm trying to make that channel more or less like a repository for information about DARPA, military industrial complex. I'm starting to branch out a little bit, but the main focus is always Maximus.
the Maximus
There,
link to everything.
yeah, yeah. There's such a critical part of all of this, and I don't think this is me sensationalizing the information. I legitimately think that. And if somebody has information to the contrary, by all means, let me know. I am not one to shut off information coming from anyone. So I have the Maximus Disclosure channel on Telegram. You can find me on Twitter at NugaJack423, and then Facebook. I have two accounts. I'm an administrator on WikiLeaks and Standby Survivors.
Awesome.
On Telegram also. And I've had just tremendous support from Pamela Olson, Tony Triano, Emma Catherine at Standby Survivors, Rick and Lexi from WikiLeaks, the FEN news channels. So you can find me in various places, and reach out to the people I'm mentioning, because they're tremendous researchers too, and they generally care about people and what we're trying to accomplish. And it's just get the information out there and share with everybody.
It's so wonderful to see, like, just a growing community of people. Like, we're all meeting each other, connecting, sharing our work, sharing each other's work. Together we're standing strong. And that's what the enemy fears the most. And it's happening so organically. So it's amazing. I love connecting with people like yourself, Jack, and some of the researchers you went through and platforms that you just discussed, and they're doing such an incredible job, and there's just so many people that are being moved to cover the area that they know about and bring things forward. And I think it's just, it's citizen journalism, isn't it? We're getting the truth out direct to
It
the
really
people.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so thank you again, Gabby.
You are so
Really
welcome. Thank you for your time joining us today, and I'm sure we'll have you again, Jack. So I know you've got such a wealth of knowledge, and I feel like we've kind of just given everyone a good framework. So we'll let that settle, and then we can dive deeper.
yeah, because even like I could do a search right now and find new information.
Yeah.
That's how that's how much stuff is out there that I'm still discovering. Um, but yeah, it's I all the information is there for free. All you gotta have is an ear to listen. If I don't know, then I'll reach out to somebody who might know. If they don't, then we'll all learn together.
That's right.
I think we have to do that. We have to, you know, my skill sets are pretty, you know, in a niche area of research, I guess. But utilize your gifts that you're given, you know, and share with everybody. Usually you'll find some overlap.
So very true. Well, I just wanted to say a massive thank you, Jack, to you for all of your research and everything you're doing to spread this information for our children and very much for the whole of humanity, because we need to understand these concepts and really understand the enemy to be able to push back on it. So thank you for your time today, and I'm sure we'll have you on again soon.
That would be great. Thank you again.